Jane Fonda lectures the country on empathy, but wasn't she the person a couple years ago that advocated for murdering pro-lifers? Also, Trump this round is not here to make friends. He is sticking it to the Maine governor in defense of women and girls, and I love it. We will also be talking about what is going on in Israel versus Hamas and giving an update on the persecution situation in Africa, specifically the Congo, as Christians there are being targeted by radical Muslims. We've got a lot to get to on today's episode of Relatable. Hey guys, welcome to Relatable. Happy Tuesday. Hope everyone is having a wonderful week so far. I apologize if you can tell that I've got allergies every time it's warm outside and I go outside, especially at the beginning of spring. I get hit with these allergies. I've been slacking on my sea moss gel and my local elderberry, so I'll have to re-up that to try to get these allergies under control. But I apologize if that inhibits my my ability to talk clearly. Okay, before we get into everything today, I will power through my allergies. But before we get into all of that, I've got a very important announcement, and that is Share the Arrows 2025. Y'all, this is the week. I am so pumped. This Friday, tickets will be on sale for the general public. That is at sharethearrows.com. Go to sharethearrows.com this Friday. It will be available first thing in the morning. I wanted to make them available before you send the kids off to school so you have time to be able to wake up and to do that first thing Friday morning. That's sharethearrows.com. Y'all, it's going to be amazing. We'll have speaker drops soon. One thing I can tell you, Francesca Battistelli is coming back. She is confirmed to lead worship yet again, so it's just going to be an amazing experience. We've got some familiar faces coming back. We've got some new faces and voices, or faces and voices that you've heard and seen before, but that weren't at Share the Arrows last year. So I'm just so incredibly pumped for it. Just a heads up, the tickets are via Ticketmaster this year. So it's not going to be sitting in pews like we did last year. There will be actual seats, and so you'll have to get your seat. So make sure that before Friday, you're getting with your friends, you're deciding who you want to come, and you are getting your tickets together. There will also be amazing VIP packages that are even much better than last year, even though last year it was awesome. So make sure, mark your calendars this Friday. But if you are a Blaze Unlimited subscriber, you can go ahead and get your tickets right now. You have access to those. Search your email right now. You should have an email on how to get your tickets to Share the Arrows. You get access to those early bird tickets as low as $99. So go ahead and check your email. If you are a Blaze TV subscriber, so Blaze TV Plus subscriber, you get access to those tickets first thing tomorrow morning. We've got a limited number of those early bird tickets. So if you check your email first thing Wednesday morning, should be 7 a.m. Central, 6 a.m. Central, 7 a.m. Eastern time, you will see how you can get those tickets. And if you're not a subscriber, but you want to go ahead and get your Share the Arrows tickets, you can go to blazetv.com/Allie. Use Share the Arrows 30. You'll get $30 off your subscription. Then you can have access to those early bird tickets. And again, it's limited. And so make sure you get your tickets fast as you can. All right. Those are all the announcements that we have for today. Sharethearrows.com Friday. Super pumped about that. Now let's get into everything going on in the world, or as much as we can cover in about an hour. First, I just want to give some amazing President Trump moments. The propaganda is so strong, but the fact of the matter is, I think, at least from my perspective, he is leading well. Things are getting done. I know we've got some concerns about what is going on with federal funding, even from the conservative side. We've got some conservative federal employees that don't like everything that Elon Musk is doing. We'll get into some of that this week, debunking some myths, addressing what I think are very reasonable concerns and questions that people have. But overall, I think President Trump is truly trying to make good on his promise to drain the swamp and to get inefficient and ineffective people out of the federal government. He is doing the best that he possibly can to ensure the deportation of violent criminals and illegal aliens in this country. And he is appointing people to very important positions that are going to lead our institutions, our intelligence agencies in a direction of honesty and truth and law enforcement. And I think we should all be really excited about that. He is not here to make friends. I've said that before. Trump round 2 is not here to make friends, and I love that. And let me just play you one example of this in an exchange that Trump had with the Maine governor. This was going around on X, and I just responded by saying I love him so much. I love Trump 2.0 so much. So let me just play you this clip, and then I'll back up and give you the context. I just don't think Trump 2016 would have talked to a Democrat governor publicly like this. Here's shot 3.
The NCAA has complied immediately, by the way. That's good. But I understand Maine. Is Maine here, the governor of Maine? Well,
I'm here.
are you not going to comply with it?
I'm complying with state and federal laws.
We are the federal law. Well, you better do it. You better do it because you're not going to get any federal funding at all if you don't. And by the way, your population, even though it's somewhat liberal, although I did very well there, your population doesn't want men playing in women's sports. So you better comply because otherwise you're not getting any federal funding.
See you in court.
Every state, good, I'll see you in court. I look forward to that. That should be a real easy one. And enjoy your life after governor because I don't think you'll be in elected politics.
Oh my goodness. I love that he just had that exchange right there. So let me give you some color if you don't already know. That was last week at the National Governors Association's Winter Summit at the White House. So that was Governor Janet Mills of Maine. He is calling her out for her refusal to comply with his new executive order, which bans men from competing in women's sports. That is him doubling down on that. She says, if you couldn't hear or see that, see you in court. He says, yeah, I look forward to that. And I also hope that you enjoy your life after your political career is over, because basically we are going to ensure that that's what happens to you. And I say, go President Trump, because you are defending girls. And again, the irony is that Janet Mills probably considers herself a glass ceiling shattering feminist, and President Trump, the supposed chauvinist misogynist, is doing more to protect vulnerable girls than she is. So on President Trump's first day, he signed an executive order that officially acknowledges there are only 2 sexes and preserves women-only spaces from males. There was also another executive order. We talked about this at the time, that he officially declares that women's sports are to be protected. Women and girls spaces are to be protected. And then after these executive orders, Maine's Department of Education issued a statement opposing Trump's executive orders and instructing government schools to ignore the president's executive action. The Maine Department of Education also argued that they are required to comply with the Maine Human Rights Act, which prohibits discrimination based on a variety of factors, including so-called gender identity and gender expression. How crazy it is to consider or to think that civil rights law could protect your imagination, could protect a self-declaration. And so, say you declare yourself a tree, are you now protected under natural conservation laws? It doesn't make any sense that we are protecting the imaginations, the declarations, the self-identity of men who want to enter into girls' spaces. Look, men and boys who want to enter into girls' spaces where they are going to the bathroom and changing are inherently unsafe. Okay, I am not buying this idea that they feel that they are born in the wrong body, that they have distress, that the only way they will achieve peace with their body, their thoughts, their identity is changing in front of a bunch of teenage girls. No, this is a ploy. This is an epidemic of porn addiction. These are porn-addled boys and men who get off on these humiliation rituals where either they are being humiliated or they are humiliating girls by entering into their spaces beating them in sports, sometimes injuring them, like the conversation we had with the young volleyball player Peyton McNabb, who is still enduring probably lifelong brain problems and spine problems because a ball was spiked in her face by a boy identifying as a girl on the opposite team. This is all part of a fetish. And if you don't believe me, you need to go back, listen to my interviews with Genevieve Gluck. We've talked about this several times. This is a perfect example. Janet Mills, everyone who is on the side of so-called trans girls, aka boys pretending to be girls, have a very serious case of toxic empathy. Toxic empathy is when empathy is used as a tool of emotional manipulation in order to get you to believe that to be progressive or to be a good person, you have to be progressive. So they'll hoist up a particular victim, like a boy who says that he's in distress and really just wants to wrestle girls, and say this person needs to be helped. This person is vulnerable, and any policy that discriminates against this person is cruel. And if you are really compassionate and if you give a crap about anyone, then you will have empathy for them, you'll feel how they feel, and you will support our policy protecting them. Well, toxic empathy kills. Toxic empathy ignores reality and morality. Toxic empathy ignores the true victim on the other side of the equation. When it comes to abortion, it ignores the baby that is being aborted. When it comes to gender, it ignores the women and girls whose spaces, whose scholarships, whose privacy, whose rights are being violated. When it comes to illegal immigration, it ignores Lake and Riley. When it comes to social justice, it ignores the victims of the crimes and instead focuses on the criminals who have had a really hard life and deserve restorative justice, which is typically just being let out of jail and allowed to commit crimes again. So this is yet another example of toxic empathy run amok. And when toxic empathy affects policy, people are going to get hurt. So Maine is in this position now of defying these orders. And here's what it looks like. Last week, a trans-identifying boy won the girls' pole vaulting state title in Maine when he had previously placed 5th in the boys' pole vault just 1 year prior. We'll put up this picture of what this person looked like. Okay, so here's a picture. Here's a side by side. You've got him there on the left. He's in 5th place. He just looks like a regular boy. He's wearing the long shorts, muscular, athletic looking guy. And then in the picture on the right, now his name is Katie. He's wearing short shorts, but he's very obviously male. He just looks like a boy, a young man wearing short shorts with long hair. And oh, what is that? It looks like he changed positions on the pedestal there. He went from 5th place to 1st place. Now, these pictures are just 1 year apart. 1 year apart. Did this person become a champion just 1 year later? Did his athletic prowess improve that much? Did estrogen give him superpowers over the course of these 365 days? I don't think so. I think this is someone who just wanted to compete against girls because it's easier. Because it's a fast way to get a scholarship, to get a championship title. And again, I think there are men who probably have dealt with a lot of rejection, a lot of embarrassment because women don't like them, who get off on embarrassing other women. You cannot tell me that this is just an innocent case of a young boy with gender dysphoria who just wants to play. All of this nonsense that you see in the media, let them play, or banning transgender people from sports. No one's banning transgender people from sports because there's no such thing as a transgender person. There's a person who believes that they are the opposite sex. There's no one who has ever actually successfully transitioned into the other sex. And so this person can continue to play sports. He just has to compete against boys. Girls have to compete against girls. They are welcome to play. They are welcome to compete, but they cannot compete against the opposite sex. So that is what Maine is protecting. Maine, Janet Mills, a supposed feminist, is for violating the space, the privacy, the rights, the bodies, the protections, the opportunities of girls. And Donald Trump is not afraid to stand up for them. So this is going to court, like Janet Mills said. They announced a Title IX, or the Department of Education, the Federal Department of Education, their Civil Rights Division under Trump, announced a Title IX investigation into Maine's Department of Education. The investigation could result in Maine schools losing $250 million in annual federal funding. Following the announcement of the DOE's investigation, Governor Mills claimed President Trump does not have the right to withhold funding in an attempt to coerce someone into compliance with his will. Of course he does. That is what the federal government does. They did it under Biden. They did it under Obama. Yes, of course he has the right and the responsibility to do that because this is the right thing. I don't want to hear, well, what if Democrats did this? What if the shoe was on the other foot? Democrats do this. They do this. They would do this. They have done this. And by the way, the Biden administration did this when he took away SNAP lunches for poor kids in public schools who received Title IX funding, who did not allow boys into girls' restrooms and locker rooms. The Biden administration said, if you do not do that, if you do not allow these boys into girls' spaces, where these girls, by the way, are getting raped, are getting violated by these young men in many cases, if you do not allow that, then we will not give you funding for these lunches and breakfasts for these poor students in these impoverished schools. So don't say, well, what if the Democrats, they did do this. They did. And you know what? There's a thing called morality. We don't believe in moral relativism. The difference between Biden doing it and Trump doing it is that Trump is doing it for a good reason and Biden did it for a bad reason. Okay? Trump is doing it to protect girls, the more vulnerable sex, and Biden did it to violate them. One is good, one is bad. Conservatives should not be against all power. We are for the existence of the government. We are not anarchists. Of course, we believe in constitutional restraints. We believe in checks and balances. We live in a representative democracy that is inherently supposed to be accountable to us and the different branches accountable to each other. That's how it's supposed to work. But we are not against the use of power for righteous ends. Democrats use that power a lot. They flex those muscles a lot for unrighteous ends. And this is a good thing. President Trump, again, is standing up for women. The Heritage Foundation senior legal fellow Sarah Parshall-Perry writes that Maine will lose in court as they battle against the Trump administration because Title IX protects women and Maine must comply with federal civil rights law to receive DOE funding. You'll remember Biden said, no, Title IX means that boys can become girls. And Trump said, nope, that's not. That's actually not how we are interpreting this at all. So good on President Trump. It's also worth knowing the Supreme Court will decide United States v. Scrimetti this term, which will determine whether discrimination based on alleged transgender status is entitled to any heightened scrutiny or protection under the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause. The majority of justices expressed skepticism during oral arguments. We talked about this at the time, that so-called transgender status would be entitled to heightened protection. And remember, it kind of goes back to that, is this an immutable characteristic or not, which the side defending so-called transgender rights really couldn't be consistent on. Okay, before we move on, I just want to play another great Trump moment. This is more lighthearted, but this morning, President Trump stopped to say hello to the first official White House tour group of this term, and his greeting was followed by the group chanting USA, which is awesome. Here's Top 5.
But I want to thank you very much for coming. The tour is so great. We did such a good job. First Lady worked very hard in making it perfect, and I think you're going to really love it. And I heard you were here, and I said, let's stop by and say hello. It's a group of very smart-looking people, I must say. Very smart. Maybe someday you'll be here as the president, right? Somebody in this group has a chance. Have a good time. Have a great tour. And you're going to give them a special tour, okay? You're going to get a special tour. Have fun, everybody.
That is so sweet. Imagine being in that tour group. Like you're just taking a simple tour of the White House, and then the President of the United States comes down there to say hello. Also, I love how he credits Melania for making the White House look good. Certified wife guy. I love that. Thank you, President Trump. So sweet. All right, we've got to move on to a very sad story, but it's an important one for us to talk about, and it involves America because we are involved in the conflict in the Middle East between Hamas and Israel, and we just need to give a little bit of an update on what is going on there and make sure that we're thinking clearly and morally about this situation. But let me pause and tell you about Good Ranchers. Good Ranchers is the meat company we trust for all of the meat in the Stuckey home. I don't know if you know this, but 85% of the grass-fed beef that you are getting in grocery stores is actually from abroad. They're allowed to say that they're made in the USA just because they're packaged in the USA, but most of them are harvested from cows that do not live here. We don't even know the quality, the regulations, all of that in whatever country they're from. But for Good Ranchers, they get all of their meat from America's farms and ranches. And so you can trust that you are supporting American industry. You're getting high quality craft beef, better than organic chicken, really good seafood. We love their shrimp, their wild caught salmon. It's so good. We eat their beef almost every night. We had some steak last night. That was amazing. It's just great to have one portion of my meal, my protein, accounted for every day. I don't have to think about it. It's always right there in my freezer. I never have to go to the grocery store making sure I'm getting the best quality stuff, the right kind of meat, and then you have to worry about inflation. Thankfully, when you get Good Ranchers, you are getting really affordable and convenient, high quality American meat sent to your front door every month. And right now, if you go to goodranchers.com and you use my code Allie, you get $25 off. Plus, when you subscribe to any of their boxes, I've got my own customized box that you can buy from. It's great for moms who are on the go. You can also get free ground beef, chicken breast, or salmon in every order for a year. It's a really good deal. Goodranchers.com, code Allie. So let's talk about the Bibas family and what is going on in Israel. So last Thursday, Israel received the bodies of 3 hostages held by Hamas, including those of Ariel Bibas. He was 4 years old when he was taken, and Kiefer Bibas, after the terror group, he was only 9 months old when he was taken, after the terror group paraded the coffins on stage in front of cheering crowd. So let's back up a little bit. On October 7th, 2023, we all remember this very fateful day. Hamas perpetrated the worst terrorist attack in Israel's history, killing approximately 1,200 civilians, including more than 40 American citizens, and kidnapping 251 people, including 12 Americans. And I just want us to sit in that for a second, because when time passes and so many things happen, it's really easy to forget the gravity of any kind of situation, especially when you don't live in a country. And I'm not saying that we have to care equally about everything that happens in every country. In fact, we don't have the capacity to do that. Sometimes social media makes us think that we have to have equal care for everyone at all times. Only God can do that because He is omniscient and He's omnipotent. We do not have that ability. However, this was an especially horrific incident that occurred to one of our allies, really our only real ally in the Middle East, the only real democracy in the Middle East. And they were they were attacked by a terrorist group that literally paraglided into a music festival and raped, abused, and murdered and kidnapped innocent civilians and children. So during the terror attack, the Bibas family was among those abducted from their home, taken hostage. We see this picture, mom, dad. We've got Shiri Bibas, that's the mother, and then Yarden, who is the father, and they're 2 sweet little redheaded children. And typically I don't show the faces of children, in pictures, but in this case, I think it's really important to see who they are and what they looked like and their humanity. So they were all taken, And in the first phase of a ceasefire deal between Hamas and Israel, which began on January 19th, Hamas agreed to hand over 33 hostages in return for Israel freeing 1,900 Palestinian prisoners. So again, I just want to pause there and show you the difference between the two sides. So Hamas is demanding the release of, in many cases, violent criminals, and in some cases terrorists, from Israel's prisons, while Israel is demanding the release of hostages, including children, including babies, innocent civilians that were kidnapped, that were abducted by this terrorist regime on October 7th. So the two sides right there are not the same. They're not equivalent. Shiri Bibas was released alive by Hamas on February 1st. Then last Thursday, Hamas claimed it was releasing the bodies of Yarden's wife and 2 sons. Hamas had previously claimed that Shiri and the children were dead, but there was still hope that Hamas had lied about that. We'd seen that in the past, kind of a form of psychological, emotional terrorism. Hamas had lied about this with other hostages. That was the hope, who were, and that they were actually alive. Hamas handed over the bodies during what was described as a ceremony with large crowds, including children. And so they had these caskets of Shiri and her 2 children, so they said. And as they were parading them out, I mean, they look like a terrorist regime, but then you also have these Palestinian civilians that seem to be cheering this on. Here's someone. I mean, this is celebratory music here. Celebratory music is playing as they are taking out these caskets of these children and supposedly their mother. And then we have Gazan children who are cheering as this is happening in front of a Bibi Netanyahu poster. The Bibi Netanyahu poster says, "The war criminal Netanyahu and his Nazi army killed them," this family, "with missiles from Zionist warplanes." Okay, well, that is obviously propaganda. You see Bibi Netanyahu there. He's got like vampire teeth. He's got blood dripping out of his mouth. Just remember that these people from a very young age in Palestine are groomed to hate Jews. They hate Jews the most, they hate Christians second, and they believe in their righteous cause of totally destroying the Jewish state. And so they're not like above any kind of deceit or any kind of violence because they have been told from infancy that this is a righteous cause that they have been given by Allah himself. And so here are those children cheering as all of this is happening. Sot 2. And so they're just kind of repeating this about Netanyahu and the war crimes. They're celebrating. And of course, all of these people, both the members of Hamas and these children, are all people made in the image of God. Like, I want salvation for all of these people. That would be the best case scenario. And I feel for these children who are not coming up with these thoughts on their own. They're given these thoughts from a very early age and are told you have to repeat it in order to be accepted. This is just our culture. This is our religion. This is what we believe. But I just want you to see also, this is the pervasive culture there. This idea that Hamas acts alone, that it's completely independent from all Palestinians, and that Palestinians really hate Hamas and they don't agree with Hamas. I don't think that's generally a correct description of what Gaza is like, of what Palestine is like. Now, I'm not saying that there is no one in opposition to Hamas in Palestine. I'm not saying that there are no Christians there. There are Christians there who are persecuted and are very oppressed by Hamas, who obviously don't share the same ideology as this terrorist regime. However, in general, Palestinians agree with this deeply anti-Jewish sentiment and believe this is part of their Islamic dictate to carry out genocide of the Jews. So the coffins themselves that are being carried out each had a picture of the hostages with a sticker that said date of arrest, October 7th, 2023. So even if they are saying, oh, Bibi Netanyahu killed them with their missiles, they are saying that they arrested these people. Now, when they say arrested these people, they are talking about going into Israel and getting these people from their homes and then taking them hostage. So the IDF, Israeli Defense Forces, got the coffins. They had to check the coffins for bombs and make sure that this wasn't another attempt at terrorism by Hamas, because again, you can't really put anything past them. I also want to make a note here about this ceremony and Red Cross's involvement. So Red Cross has kind of been, in some ways, they would call themselves a go-between here. There's been a lot of, I think, justified criticism of how the Red Cross has acted over the past year plus. So they were collecting the bodies and bringing them to Israeli authorities. At first, they refused to take part in the ceremony. Hamas threatened to keep the bodies if the Red Cross would not participate. So the Red Cross representative signed documents on stage to receive the bodies. The problem is, the sad part here is that the body of Shiri Bibas was not the body that Hamas actually released to the Red Cross. That, of course, is not Red Cross's fault. They had no way of knowing that, but that was a very sad discovery by the IDF. Hamas initially sent the remains of an unnamed Gazan woman, later claiming that Shiri's remains were mixed up with other bodies under rubble after an airstrike, again caused by Israel. Hamas released the correct remains the following day. And it also just goes to show how valuable or not valuable they find the bodies of their own fellow Gazans if they're willing to just like find a body and send one off as a replacement body, either by mistake, which I don't believe was a mistake, or intentionally. That is a perfect representation of what Hamas does to their own people. So I hear criticism a lot. Israel is killing civilians and women and children in Gaza, which of course is truly, I'm not just saying that to be trite and to try to be even-handed. It's truly a tragedy when any of these civilians die. Like, it is, I do not want any civilian to die. Do you think I want any baby to die? I don't care what their nationality is. I don't care what their religion is. I don't care what their background is. I don't care what their parents believe or have taught to them. Like, I don't want any of these children to die. I don't want any of these babies to be victimized. I don't want any of the women or any of the civilians on either side of this conflict to be put in danger in any way. But this is what Hamas does. They headquarter themselves in schools and under hospitals and in civilian areas so that they can use Israel's attacks on them as propaganda to say that Israel is targeting civilians. They use their own people as human shields. That is part of their strategy. And so this woman was probably a human shield for Hamas. If that is even true, if the story of this Gazan woman dying by an airstrike is even true, that is because Israel was attacked unprovoked in an act of terrorism. They're doing whatever possible to get their innocent people back. They're trying to attack Hamas. We don't like civilian casualties, but it's very hard to limit those when, again, Hamas is using their own civilians as human shields. Hamas has no regard whatsoever for human life, and that is extremely evident both in their treatment of their own people and in their treatment of the Israeli people. So Hamas claimed that these hostages whose remains were returned, so eventually the mom, then these two sweet babies, that they had been killed in those airstrikes. But Israel said that their forensic testing found, and this is very gruesome, it's very gruesome, found that these two young boys had been killed by their captors with their bare hands, beaten to death, and then suffocated, then choked to death after their kidnapping on October 7th. We don't know why exactly they were killed. Probably because they were too difficult to care for. I mean, you've got a baby who is 9. I mean, I'm trying really hard not to cry, but you've got a baby who is probably breastfeeding, and they probably, for the sake of torture and punishment, separated the mom and the babies. And so they were probably crying a lot. They were probably screaming. They were probably making a lot of noise, and they were probably just too much trouble. And so they murdered these boys. They murdered the mom. We don't know when. We don't know how. Did she see the torture and the murder of her babies? I don't know. We don't know exactly how that happened, but that is who Israel is dealing with here. Israeli spokesman, Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari, said Ariel and Kiefer Bibas were murdered by terrorists in cold blood. The terrorists did not shoot the 2 young boys. They killed them with their bare hands. It's just too much. It's just too much, but it's important for us to make sure that we know what's going on, that we make sure that we understand that evil really does exist. And look, I am America first. And as I've said so many times, every single government has the right and the responsibility to put the best interests, the safety, and the security of their own people first. No country has the obligation to give money or give defense or give anything to another country. Now, they may choose to do that. It may be strategically in their favor to do that. It may be an act of altruism, which I don't really think exists in foreign policy, but it could just be because a country thinks it's the right thing to do out of compassion, but it typically has to do with their own strategic advantage. And so a country may choose to do that, but if they choose to be isolationist, I think that is that country's right. So I am saying this as someone who is America first all the way. I do not see how someone can look at what's happening in this conflict and say, well, there's bad on both sides. Of course, in every single conflict, because we live in a fallen world, there is bad on both sides. I am not someone who is here to defend Israel at all costs or defend any country at all costs. I don't even defend everything America does at all costs because I don't believe in every choice the American government has ever made. So I'm not saying that Israel is above criticism, but when we look at what is happening there, when we look at the actions of Hamas, when we look at what has occurred to these hostages, I don't see how we can both sides this one. I don't see how you can be a moral relativist and see that. I don't see how you cannot see the unique threat of Islam. The unique threat of Islam that is not characteristic of any other religion or belief system in all of the world. And people, accuse evangelicals of like being propagandized by the Schofield Bible and dispensationalism. I'm not a dispensationalist. I've never read a Schofield Bible, and I know the arguments that the interpretation has been taken into other translations and that we've all been propagandized and lied to by Israel to have this like sacred view of Israel. Well, I don't fall into that camp. I'm looking at this very practically. I think radical Islam is a scourge, okay? I think it is a threat everywhere it goes. There is no group that oppresses Muslims like Muslims. Everywhere there is a large group of Muslims, whether it's in the Middle East or in Europe, crime goes up, terrorism goes up, violence goes up. If you look at the long list of terrorist regimes around the world, 99% of them are Muslim groups. Okay? That is the ideology that characterizes Palestine. And then you've got Israel, who, again, I don't even know every single policy that has ever been implemented by Israel to even defend every single policy, but I do know it is a democracy. I do know that Arab Muslims live in Israel. I do know that Christians live in Israel, that there is at least a degree of religious liberty and free speech that exists there, that I can travel there safely as a woman, as a Christian. And I cannot go to the Muslim world and say the same thing. So I'm looking at this very practically. I'm looking at the two ideologies, the two sets of ideas that are represented by each country. And I want to protect that tiny democracy, the home of so many sacred sites, both for Jews and for Christians. I want to protect that small democratic country that is the that is the victim of constant attempted genocides by the Muslim world. That just makes sense to me. That's what I want for them. And we can debate over how America is involved in that, what that looks like, to what extent. I am totally open to that debate. I don't think it's a matter of like we should give them unconditional aid and weaponry. I'm not saying that. We can debate that. But like if I'm going to stand on one side and say, I hope this side wins, it's going to be on Israel's side. Okay, we don't even have to get into the theological conversation of that, aspects of that. I can just look at what's happening and say, yeah, one side seems right and one side seems really wrong. And I hope the better side wins. And also, I just pray for these families, for the hostages, for the families of the hostages. I mean, it's just evil beyond words. And I would be very careful about the propaganda and, again, the toxic empathy, emotional manipulation that is being used against us on this subject. And speaking of violence and worldviews and Islam, I also want to bring up the horrible beheadings that happened in the Congo. According to Open Doors US, which monitors Christian persecution around the world, 70 Christians in the Democratic Republic of Congo were forced from their homes early in the morning of February 13th by Islamist rebels from the Allied Democratic Forces. Just remember also, the names of these things mean nothing. I've had people try to tell me China's Republic, the People's Republic of China. The names mean nothing. The names mean nothing, okay? This is a radical Islamic group. So Allied Democratic Forces, a group affiliated with terror group Islamic State or ISIS, they brought them to a small church where they were all tied up and beheaded. So at first, 20 Christian men and women came out, were captured during this early morning raid. Later, many from the community gathered to figure out how to release or rescue these hostages. However, these militants surrounded the village and captured another 50 Christians. The hostages were moved to a small Christian church where they were then killed. The Islamic terrorist group would not let Christian leaders bury the dead for over 5 days. John Samuel, Open Doors legal expert for sub-Saharan Africa, stated the violence takes place in a context of impunity where almost no one is held accountable. This massacre is a clear indicator of widespread human rights violations against civilians and vulnerable communities, often targeting Christians, perpetrated by ADF and Islamic State affiliate. The group has not taken credit for it, but it has been established that they did carry out this crime. This, unfortunately, has been happening for a long time, and this kind of Islamist violence is extremely pervasive on the continent of Africa. Really, just Islam as a worldview, as an ideology, is just anti-peace. It is anti-true progress. Again, everywhere there are groups of Islamists, groups of Muslims throughout Europe. Crime goes up, violence goes up, sex crimes against women and children grow up. It is a very barbaric and brutal ideology. Does that mean that every single person who identifies as a Muslim is going to be violent, is going to be barbaric, is going to be a terrorist? No, of course that's not true. But as a whole, I mean, look at the Muslim majority world. Again, look at the terrorist regimes and what ideology they are a part of. And this is the strangest part of left-wing ideology, and progressivism is their protection of Islam. Despite Islam having nothing in common with LGBTQ, in fact, they shove those people off of buildings, they execute them. Nothing in common with your typical like progressive UC Berkeley professor, when really all it comes down to for progressivism is that they hate Christians. They hate Christianity, they hate God, and they know that Muslims do too. And that's where the alliance comes in. And so they don't have to think very hard about like what Muslims really believe. They just think brown non-Christian good and white Christian bad, anti-America good, America bad. And so they see that reflected in Islam and they get on board with it. And so that's why you don't see the media talking about this at all. Like they're not going to raise a ruckus about dozens of Christians being beheaded. They don't care that Christianity is actually the most persecuted religion in the world. the vast majority of people who are persecuted in the world religiously are Christians. And people forget that, or people don't know that, or people deny that, argue with me when I say that. And it's not because that information isn't available, because it is very readily available, but because the media doesn't talk about it. And unfortunately, even the conservative among us, they allow their outrage and their care to be dictated by what the media talks about. So make sure that we are praying for our brothers and sisters in Christ. When Jesus is talking about the least of these, what you do to the least of these, you do unto me. This is who he is talking about. He is talking about persecuted Christians around the world. He is not talking about the world's poor, because he says, the least of these, my brothers, the least of these, my brothers. And he also says in Galatians, or God says in Galatians 6:10, so then, as we have opportunity, let us do good to everyone, and especially to those who are of the household of faith. Actually, we see over and over again throughout Scripture that we are really supposed to prioritize the well-being of and the care of fellow believers before we look to everyone else. And so think often, pray often for those who are persecuted, Christians who are persecuted both here, but especially abroad. All right, I've got one more thing to respond to, and this was at the SAG Awards last night, and it kind of ties into everything that we're talking about, because progressives claim to have a monopoly on empathy and compassion. And Hanoi Jane Fonda, she said as much last night at her Lifetime Achievement Awards celebration. So I'll get to that in just a second. Let me tell you about our last sponsor, and that is Jace Medical. They're an emergency supply of medication. They offer an emergency supply of medication to have on hand in the event of an emergency or when professional medical help is not readily available. They'd like to thank all the first responders out there as we've been dealing with snowstorms, fires, other intense weather across the country. It's easy to forget how many people put their lives on the line to save their fellow Americans, but first responders can't be everywhere all at once. And when it comes to emergencies, the thing you need to remember is that you are your own first responder. One of the most important tools you can have in your kit is Jace Case. I can't recommend these highly enough. If you're the type of person who wants to be prepared when disaster strikes, you're going to want this kit for your home, for your family. They offer a personalized emergency kit that contains essential antibiotics and medications that treat the most common and deadly bacterial infections. It provides 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use. They even have ivermectin as an add-on. Go to jace.com, enter their giveaway. They're doing a giveaway right now of a free Jace Go case, or you can purchase your case by entering code Allie and you'll get a discount. Jace.com, code Allie. Okay, Jane Fonda is a year younger than my grandmother, who died like 5 years ago. And she has done a lot in her life. She obviously has a very, she's got a long career in acting, but she also has a background in activism. And you probably will remember, or you recall, maybe you weren't alive during this time, but you heard about it when she posed for a picture in the 1960s with like an anti-aircraft missile in North Vietnam. And South Vietnamese people and Americans were obviously very upset about this because it seemed like a stunt to show that she is pro-communism. She was against the Vietnam War, but it actually seemed like she was on the side of the anti-American communists. She has been a woke progressive for a very long time, and a lot of people, understandably, were very angry with her after that stunt. It's not just about being against the Vietnam War. It is about ostensibly being pro-communism. You might remember in March 2023, Jane Fonda joked about murdering pro-life politicians and activists on The View. Here's what she said, SOT 6.
We're not going back. I don't care what the laws are. We're not going back.
I think the women will Rise up.
That's the activist
That's Jane.
speaking, and she probably will get a Nobel Prize.
But it's the truth.
Very soon.
It is the truth. We're not going to do it.
Besides
We're gonna
marching and protesting, what else do you suggest?
Well, it
I
doesn't
thought of
happen
murder.
overnight. It's not a miraculous. What did you say?
Murder.
She's kidding. Wait a second. She's just
Yeah,
kidding.
don't say that. That's
You don't know. They'll pick up on that and
Yeah,
just run
that's
with
the
it.
worst.
She's just
joking.
kidding. It's
Well, let me talk to you about.
Yeah, if you're just listening to that, when everyone is trying to cover for her, Joy Behar is like, oh, please don't sue us. She's kidding. She's sitting there very seriously looking off to the side so everyone knows that she's serious. We should murder pro-lifers. Shouldn't be surprising at all that the very people who believe that we should murder unborn babies also want to kill people outside of the womb for disagreeing with them. But now she gets to lecture us on empathy. Jane Fonda gets to tell us what it means to be a good person, y'all. So last night, as she was accepting a Lifetime Achievement Award during the Screen Actors Guild Awards, she used this opportunity to say, be more empathetic like me, sought for.
Make no mistake, empathy is not weak or woke. And by the way, woke just means you give a damn about other people.
Okay, she says a whole lot of people are going to be really hurt by what is happening, what is coming our way, even if they're of a different political persuasion. We need to call upon our empathy and not judge, but listen from our hearts and welcome them into our tent. We are going to need a big tent to resist successfully what's coming at us. So she thinks, Trump is a fascist and we're going to have tyranny and totalitarianism. She expects people who voted for Trump to be like, oh my gosh, Jane Fonda, all of you liberals were right. Kamala Harris really would have been a great president. Well, it's not going to happen. And by the way, their empathy gets people killed. Their empathy means killing babies in the womb, mutilating kids' bodies, opening the border so more Laken Rileys die, releasing murderers from prison. Also, Jane Fonda and other people can feel better about themselves. And that is why it is not healthy empathy, but it's actually toxic empathy, ignoring the true victims on the other side of the moral equation, ignoring the victims of their policies. And so Jane Fonda represents a lot of people who mistakenly think that their progressivism makes them good people, when actually they are time and time again on the side of the true oppressors. If you want to know more about the subject toxic empathy, if you want a very thorough but quick breakdown of the progressive manipulation tactics, then read my book, Toxic Empathy. It is, thank the Lord, a New York Times bestseller, and I hope and believe it's helped a lot of people, especially Christian women, navigate the progressive propaganda that tries to manipulate us into being on the left side. It gives a logical, scientific, historic, but also a biblical perspective on how we should think about some of the biggest and most controversial issues of our day. All right, that's all we've got time for. We will be back here tomorrow.